Good morning viewers, I'm Siti Fadila Tambong from PBI Morning News, bringing you the latest news today. The first news is about the reason Labuan Bajo is difficult to complete in the world of tourism. Many think Labuan Bajo will become a new pulse for tourism in Indonesia. This is of course reasonable because Labuan Bajo has a very spectacular landscape. Its uniqueness, which only exists here, such as for example the Komodo dragon, underwater beauty, and many others. Labuan Bajo is one of the favorite tourist attractions for several people in Indonesia. Even the Indonesian government is very confident in choosing Labuan Bajo to be one of the tourist areas included in the 10 New Bali concepts in Indonesia. But for years it seems that Labuan Bajo hasn't shown its attractiveness. This can be seen from the data on the number of tourists visiting Labuan Bajo in 2019. The number of tourists visiting Labuan Bajo was around 256,609. Even the latest data in 2022, the number of tourists coming to Labuan Bajo only around 117,362, a decrease when compared to Bali, where Bali can attract around 6 million tourists per year. Of course, Labuan Bajo is far behind, and the dream of becoming the new Bali in Indonesia seems too impossible. Therefore, we will discuss why it is difficult for Labuan Bajo to become a big tourist area or as successful as Bali. The first factor that makes Labuan Bajo difficult to develop is the uniqueness of its tourist style, which is different from other tourist areas in Indonesia. The uniqueness that is meant here is that Labuan Bajo tourism is more dominant, namely sea tourism, where 90% is very dependent on ship transportation. This makes the city of Labuan Bajo is only a transit area for tourists because most of the tourist attractions are on the islands around Labuan Bajo. For example, the famous islands such as Padar Island, Rinca Island, and Manjerit Island, and many other islands. And if you go to Labuan Bajo, you will really need boat transportation. Even boat transportation is the first thing you have to book before going to Labuan Bajo. Most of the tourist destinations are on the islands, so you have to use a boat. Therefore, tourists in Labuan Bajo are also famous for offering life on board packages, where packages vary from 2-day trips to 10-day trips. There are also beds on the ship, meals on board, and tours by boat transportation. Therefore, many people say that in Labuan Bajo, usually many people get off the plane straight to the pier to board the ship and vice versa. When they finished the trip on the ship, they went straight to the airport to return to their respective homes. This makes local people or local business in Labuan Bajo lose the opportunity to earn significant income for tourists visiting there. This unique thing also makes it difficult for Labuan Bajo to become a large tourist area due to its dependence on the number of exceeding ships' capacities. For example, now the capacity of ship in Labuan Bajo can only accommodate approximately 2,000 tourists per day, and if suddenly there is an increase in the number of tourists to 2,000 tourists per day, Labuan Bajo will find it very difficult to fill the excessive quota because it is not easy to provide ships on a large numbers in a short time. And also ships in Labuan Bajo are types of ships with special modification that take time to make, and of course the price of the ships is also very expensive and requires large funds to cover the increase in tourists. Therefore, the increase in the number of tourists in Labuan Bajo is very limited and very dependent on the number of exceeding ship capacities. The second factor is the location and landscape of the Labuan Bajo port itself. If you have ever been to Labuan Bajo, you must have realized that from the start Labuan Bajo was just a fishing village, which was not designed to be a big city from the start. This can be seen from its geography, where Labuan Bajo is very hilly and does not have much flat land, slanted and not easy to be transformed into a big tourism city. So if you pay attention to many famous hotels or resorts in Labuan Bajo built on sloping hilly land, and also this factor make investment in Labuan Bajo itself very costly to build a hotel in Labuan Bajo. Of course, it costs more than building the same hotel in Bali. For example, besides requiring additional funds and special architecture to build in an area with sloping land, most of the building materials are sent from outside the area, which makes the construction of Labuan Bajo itself very slow. Ranging from iron cement to ornamental plants, other regions like that are all included in the geographical factor of Labuan Bajo itself. Okay, let's move on to other factors, and the next factors, it is the human resource factor. If we look at the history of Labuan Bajo, it is a fishing village which from the start no one knew it could become a very spectacular tourism center in the last 10 years. Therefore, the human resources are very limited because most of the local residents work as fishermen, and now most of them have changed professions. Some have changed professions to become the ship captains, become tour guides, or have a small business or local business dealing with tourism. And there are also those who become crew members of ships and so on. It is this human resource factor that makes Labuan Bajo bring in a lot of people from outside, or people from outside the area are very interested in going to Labuan Bajo. Therefore, if you go to Labuan Bajo, you will meet lots of people from regions or provinces, different provinces, because it attracts a lot of people there, because previously Labuan Bajo was just a fishing village. Therefore, professional human resource for the hospital sector are also lacking, therefore many are sent from outside the area. For example, from Bali, from Lombok, from Makassar, who come to fill professional position in the hospital sector. To compensate from the development of tourism there, this can also cause conflict or social jealousy too. Yes, because local people there will compete with outsiders. And if we talk about this, it also includes the next factor, namely the investor factor. It is undeniable that in order to become a tourist area that is developing rapidly or growing rapidly, investors are also needed, and most investors in Labuan Bajo come from outside the area. For example, from Jakarta investor, Surabaya investors who come there to invest. It can be seen that there are a lot of foreign investors who invest in ship, in hotels, in restaurants, and so on. These outside investors can actually raise pros and cons. Like the pros there, they help develop quickly, especially in Labuan Bajo. And it is also opens up very poor job opportunities for the area. But on the other hand, this can also cause social jealousy or local people who feel left out because of these investors buying land, building, and ultimately making the Labuan Bajo area expensive, or local people who have owned land from generation will eventually be displaced. This actually happens in almost all areas that are getting hype or increasing tourism. It's the same as Labuan Bajo, which now has its own. So if you guys are on social media, there are lots of residents in Labuan Bajo who might protest or hold demonstration because there are internal conflict alone, starting from ship entrepreneurs or investors from outside. Actually, the regional government and the national government have made extraordinary efforts for Labuan Bajo, even though Labuan Bajo is a small city. However, the government still provide quite a large amount of funds for a city this small. So there was an issue in Labuan Bajo that it wanted it to be made exclusively. Judging from these factors, actually Labuan Bajo is more suitable to be made exclusive because it is impossible for Labuan Bajo to accommodate millions of tourists like Bali or Lombok, because the area is indeed limited. There are lots of unfavorable factors. This raises pros and cons. If Labuan Bajo is made exclusive, many of us might not be able to enjoy Labuan Bajo because it is too expensive, and local residents may lose even more income because the number of tourists will be decreased. Even though the place is very beautiful to be called one of the most beautiful places in Indonesia, it takes a lot of time and also need a lot of solution. Especially if the government wants to make Labuan Bajo one of the 10 new Balis in Indonesia, there are also several other factors that may seem small but also important. For example, Labuan Bajo is actually very targeted for certain travelers. For example, if you are on a family trip, it doesn't seem suitable in Labuan Bajo because mostly 90% of your time will be spent on the ship, especially if you are on a seasonals will be very difficult to enjoy it. And also, Labuan Bajo is very limited in terms of the lifestyle of girls. For example, the variety of restaurants that have lodging available to other supporting entertainments. Labuan Bajo is too focused on nature, while other aspects such as art and culture are still underdeveloped. It also takes time to catch up on all of these deficits. So there is a lot of development going on in Labuan Bajo itself to attract people so they don't go straight home and slightly reduce the stigma that Labuan Bajo is only a transit city. Finally, Labuan Bajo is the most beautiful place in Indonesia and you must go there, especially if you are a traveler. It can be said that Labuan Bajo is one of the mandatory spots to visit. Not only that, Labuan Bajo also has very rare animals that only exist there, namely Komodo dragons. They also have a beautiful beaches, one of which is Pink Beach. You must visit Labuan Bajo. Meanwhile, for its development, Labuan Bajo does not need to make changes, which will only cause new problems. For example, the more tourists, the more trash. The more tourists, the more criminals, and also the member of the security personnel are also very limited. That's all the news for today. Check this out at PBI Morning News or in my YouTube channel for the latest updates. I'm Siti Fadila Tambong. Thank you for watching and have a great day.